of Power, live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Tyler Kendall, I'm Joe Matthew. Tonight, the disruptions begin. The impact at airports across the country after flights are reduced in 40 major cities. And it all comes back to the ongoing government shutdown, with President Trump saying moments ago the Senate should not leave town until they have a deal. We'll speak to our reporters in Washington about what comes next.
Plus, Hungary wins an exemption from U.S. sanctions on Russian energy supplies as the country's prime minister meets with President Trump at the White House. Those details and the implications for the pressure campaign on the Kremlin when we speak with Democratic Congresswoman Madeleine Dean up ahead.
Also tonight, consumer sentiment hitting a 3-year low, taking markets today down with it. Still, the White House highlighting Thanksgiving prices at Walmart to make its point that costs are lower. We'll have details ahead.
And could Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac take equity stakes in tech companies? What the FHFA director Bill Pulte said about revamping the government-backed entities.
We begin this evening with the ongoing government shutdown, now stretching into its 38th day, if you're still keeping count, and causing big headaches at airports around the country, with the FAA today canceling more than 800 flights due to staffing shortages at airports, and it could get worse. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy saying just a few hours ago, flight cuts could reach 20% if the shutdown drags on. The question tonight, is that enough pain to drive lawmakers to the negotiating table? As President Trump now calls on senators to stay in Washington this weekend until they have a deal to end the shutdown. This after Republicans rejected an offer from Senator Chuck Schumer, who spoke on the floor earlier today.
Democrats would like to see an end to this shutdown, and we want to respect Leader Thune's desire not to negotiate on ACA until after the government reopens. Therefore, we'd like to offer a simple proposal that would reopen the government and extend the ACA premium tax credits simultaneously, and then have the opportunity to start negotiating longer-term solutions to health care costs. Let's do all three.
Republican leader John Thune calling the approach a non-starter. And so here we are. For details, we turn to Bloomberg's Megan Scully, who joins us here in our Washington bureau, leading our Capitol Influence team. Megan, it's great to have you. We don't know if you're working the weekend or not, it sounds like.
Yeah, not yet. So the Senate has talked about staying in town through the weekend. And Trump now, as you said, is urging them to do so, even as he leaves for his Florida Mar-a-Lago estate in just the next few hours, I believe. But it is unclear whether, if they were to stay, what exactly they would be doing, because this Democratic proposal that went to the floor was shot down so quickly by Republicans that we're back to square one.
Was there any update today? We had heard that maybe we were talking about a longer-term stopgap measure, maybe packaging it up, bundling it with a minibus when it comes to spending. Has there been any movement on the vehicle that Republicans are working on to ultimately one day reopen the government?
We hope, anyway. Yes, there have been side conversations on this vehicle, as you said, this minibus with Veterans Affairs and Agriculture and some other spending bills tied up that would also include a stopgap for several other agencies, the ones not covered, into probably January. But none of that really matters until they resolve the core issue here, which is the ACA subsidies that expire on January 1st. Until that gets resolved at this moment, whether it's Democrats walking away from the table or Republicans accepting their counteroffer or them finding some middle ground, there doesn't seem to be this doesn't seem to be ending anytime soon.
All right, our glimmer of hope's perhaps dodged this afternoon and evening. Bloomberg's Megan Scully, thank you as always. Now for a closer look at the impact of flight capacity cuts, we turn now to Bloomberg's Norah Mulinda, who is live from Newark Airport. Norah, today we heard the Transportation Secretary say that we could see these flight cuts go to 20% by the end of next week. Can you just give us an update? What is happening on the ground, and what would happen if the numbers got that high?
Well, Tyler, I'll give you a little bit of a glimpse of what we've been seeing today. We're ending the day just about where we started. We are seeing an uptick in foot traffic right now as we speak. We're seeing about a 15-minute wait, though, at the security line here at Newark Liberty Airport in New Jersey. And we did see a lot of people pushing through security as we've really been going through the day here. But of course, as you mentioned, a lot of the focus really here on the government shutdown and the implications here, not only for air travelers today, but what that could look like in the coming weeks here as we head into the holidays. Of course, course, we do know Vice President J.D. Vance did mention that there is some implications. There could be some implications here if we do see this prolonging in terms of implications on the economy and the consumer. And we are seeing a lot of estimates coming in from analysts estimating that about $15 billion is about the cost that we're seeing on the economy over the past few weeks, about a $15 billion cost each week here that we've been in this government shutdown that, of course, we know is the longest in U.S. history.
We talked to Chris Sununu from Airlines for America, and we'll share some of that sound a little bit later on this hour, Norah, about the cost to airlines themselves, which I know has been a big concern for investors. This is only a 4% cut today. What's it going to look like or feel like when we get to 10% by next week?
And that's what's beginning to concern some investors here as you kind of look at the stock market reaction for some of these companies. When we think about the bottom line of these airlines, there actually isn't some sort of impact that we're seeing right now. Of course, a lot of preliminary data is still coming in here, but it's about whether or not they're able to weather this storm in the long term. We did hear from TD Cowen, Deutsche Bank, both saying that we should weather this storm and it shouldn't be too much of an impact here on these airlines. But of course, it starts to beg the question about this trickling out into other areas within any sort of travel, Expedia, Airbnb, any other sort of companies that could potentially be affected by this government shutdown and potentially any sort of snags on travel here.
Bloomberg's Norah Mulinda reporting live from Newark Airport. We thank you for being on duty all day, Norah. Turning now to the other big story here in Washington, President Trump's meeting with Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, where the war on Ukraine was in focus. The president discussed Hungary's reliance on Russian oil when they got together at the White House and the possibility of an exemption from sanctions. Listen.
We're looking at it because it's very difficult for him to get the oil and gas from other areas. That question could be really asked maybe more accurately if you talked about many European countries, not Hungary necessarily, because Hungary is in a different position. But many European countries are buying oil and gas from Russia. And they have been for years. And I say, what's that all about?
And just like that, President Trump granted Hungary that very exemption from sanctions on purchases of Russian oil, providing a big win for Prime Minister Orban. For details on all this, we turn to Bloomberg's Kevin Whitelaw is with us live here in our Washington bureau. Kevin, it's good to see you. What did Hungary do to deserve this?
Well, look, I mean, Viktor Orban has always been one of Trump's closest allies in Europe, and they've had a close political relationship for a long time, also with the family. So that's something where he's basically paying off a friend and listening to a friend. So even as he rails against European purchases of Russian oil and gas, he's decided that Hungary is somehow in a different position. And in fact, Hungary has done even less than almost any other country in Europe to get away from Russian oil and has actually deepened purchases because, Orban's political future is entirely tied up with cheap energy prices.
Well, deepened purchases, I believe 90% of Hungary's crude imports come from Moscow. I was also struck by something else that happened in the cabinet room today. President Trump saying that he sees an end to this war in the, quote, not too distant future. Have we gotten any indication on where negotiations with Russia and Ukraine stand now? Any indications on if Vladimir Putin's going to come to the table?
No, I mean, I think that's more of Trump just trying to make it sound like, there's some kind of motion and some kind of pressure. He also sort of suggested in a question to Orban that, Ukraine may not have a way to win this. So he's sort of mixing his messages a little bit, both on where that war may stand, but also just on the broader question about economic and financial pressure on Russia. Obviously, this exemption does help Russia a little bit, and there's been obviously a lot of European interest in trying to find ways to convince Trump to keep up the pressure, try to make Russia have to deal. But I think the one challenge everyone's had when it comes to the Ukraine war is Ukraine has been very, very slowly losing the war, losing a tiny bit of ground, tiny bit of ground, tiny bit of ground. Nothing decisive, but Putin has a lot of patience, and nothing really that Trump is doing yet is changing that calculation.
You refer to some of the raw politics at play today with two friends who interacted with the media and spoke very highly of each other. But there was an old line about politics stopping at the water's edge, and we kind of had a reverse scenario today with a foreign leader at odds with U.S. politics frequently, at least in the last administration, at odds with Ukraine, saying in the cabinet room that the former administration, he said, after your leaving president, everything was basically broke, ruined, canceled. To be insulting the former administration was a remarkable moment.
I mean, I guess we're still past the point where some of these things seem odd because we have had so many of these moments that just would never have happened before. But obviously, that's feeding a message that Trump himself has been talking and echoing some of the things that Trump said about Biden in the same meeting. And so I think we have seen a lot of those kinds of moments where the old ways just are long gone.
Yeah.
All right, Bloomberg's Kevin Whitelaw joining us here in our Washington studios. Thank you so much. And earlier today, President Trump asked the Justice Department to start an investigation into the meatpacking industry. In a post on his social media platform, the president accused meatpacking companies of, quote, driving up the price of beef through illicit collusion, price fixing, and price manipulation. The news sent shares of JBS and Tyson Foods lower. For all the details, we turn now to Power Moves with Bloomberg's Scarlett Fu, who joins us live from World Headquarters in New York. Hey, Scarlett.
Hi, Tyler. Yeah, it's a reflection of just how much Washington drama is driving the price action here in the stock market. We saw stocks finishing the day fairly mixed, recovering from pretty sizable losses early in the day, although you do see the Nasdaq closing in the red. The offer from Democrats to end the shutdown gave the market some brief hope, and we saw indexes turn higher. Interestingly, after the Republicans rejected that offer, that didn't really stop the momentum. However, when you look at the week-to-date metrics, you could see that it was a down week. And in some ways, we shouldn't be all that surprised, given the commentary from Wall Street titans. You had David Solomon of Goldman Sachs, Ted Pick of Morgan Stanley, Ken Griffin of Citadel, all warning at the start of the week that we are due for some kind of pullback, maybe 10 to 15%. That would be healthy, given where we've gone, and not clear if what we're seeing this week is the start of that. Let's take a look at how the S&P 500 finished the week. It ended 3 straight weeks of gains, and it did fall at one point below its short-term trend line, that 50-day moving average. The Nasdaq closed out its worst week since April, when President Trump announced those reciprocal tariffs, and we've seen earnings season really wind down. CoreWeave will be reporting next week, but most of the big AI names have basically reported already, with the exception of NVIDIA. And now investors' focus are turning over to economics. They're recentering on the lack of data. And so we saw the 10-year yield finish little change on the week. There's also going to be a ton of supply coming up next week, with $150 billion of 3s, 10s, and 30s being issued next week, which will be a shortened week, by the way, as well. So a lot of supply to absorb in a short amount of time. Let's also take a look at Bitcoin, because that has become an asset that trades in line with other risky assets like equities, and it's now barely up for 2025. $100,000, I should say, was the support level. It's unclear whether that's now the new resistance level, but we keep flirting at around those levels. And also worth mentioning, too, that the VIX, which is kind of the Wall Street fear gauge, has also been elevated. It climbed to as high as 22, but as you can see, finishing the day kind of lower down. The University of Michigan's Consumer Confidence Index really indicating that investors and consumers are anxious, and this is something to keep in mind as we approach the earnings season for those consumer companies. Joe?
Scarlett, great to have you back on Balance of Power. Bloomberg's Scarlett Fu in New York. We thank you. Coming up, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy says flight cuts could get a lot worse, potentially reaching 20%. If the shutdown drags on. We'll discuss with Alex Roberts of the Association of Professional Flight Attendants coming up. But first, Republicans reject a new proposal by Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer to end the shutdown. We'll talk about what it means for lawmakers with Democratic Congresswoman Madeleine Dean of Pennsylvania. It's next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
You mean a meeting with President Putin? You mean in Hungary? Well, I'd like to keep it in Hungary, in Budapest. That meeting, it turned out I didn't want to do that meeting because I didn't think anything was going to be happening of significance. But if we have it, I'd like to do it in Budapest. Yeah, it'd be good.
It's Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio alongside Tyler Kendall. I'm Joe Matthew. President Trump hosting Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban earlier today in Washington, a big session in the cabinet room with the media. And after that meeting, which brought some rather unusual optics to the White House, President Trump granted Hungary an exemption from sanctions on Russian oil purchases, providing a big win for Orban. With us now, with her reaction to this and a lot more, Democratic Congresswoman Madeleine Dean of Pennsylvania, member of both the House Foreign Affairs Committee and the House Appropriations Committee, which means we have a lot to talk about. Congresswoman, welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio. What was behind this exemption, if nothing more than a personal relationship?
Oh, good evening to you and to Tyler. Thank you for having me back. Oh, it's just, it's more of the same with this administration and with this president. Sanctions are on, you're exempted. Tariffs are on, we'll reduce it for you. Tariffs are off. It is this erratic behavior by the president, by the administration. And we're talking about Russia here. We're talking about a country at war, 3.5 years now, at war with Ukraine. They are the aggressor. And what does Mr. Trump do? He doesn't focus on trying to end the war. He's cozying up to Orban and getting him an exemption. What happens with sanctions? They work alongside military support. They work alongside diplomatic efforts. But unfortunately, this president cannot stay focused on those three tools and instead is favoring Orban over Ukraine, frankly.
Well, we have seen Russia's crude exports slump in the past month after the U.S. did tighten sanctions and target them against some Russian oil companies. President Trump himself said today that he sees an end to the war in the, quote, not too distant future. We had the chance yesterday to speak with the Ukrainian ambassador to the U.S. and asked her about what this future of military assistance from the U.S. could look like, particularly around Tomahawk missiles. We want to let you listen to what she had to say and then get your reaction on the other side.
The discussion is still ongoing, but we have a lot of delegations working here, including Ukraine, to scale up the available financial resources to procure more military capabilities from U.S. And it's not only Tomahawks, different types of other long-range and short-range missiles. This dialogue is ongoing, and I can only say that it's rather positive.
This was considered to be news, considering that President Trump had previously signaled he wasn't going to send these weapons to Ukraine. I just want to pull on your expertise on the Foreign Affairs Committee. How critical would these types of weapons be if they end up going to the country?
I certainly hope they do. Again, it's this erratic on and off again nature. But I'll take the good news. If the administration is actually talking in a favorable way about supporting Ukraine with the Tomahawks and other weaponry, that's what we should be doing. I argued this under the Biden administration. This invasion started in February of 2022, not to talk about, of course, the 2014 incursion. But I argued with and encouraged the Biden administration, make sure we give Ukraine everything it needs to win. I would often hear the administration say, the Biden administration say, we will give Ukraine everything it needs. I said, we must finish the sentence, everything it needs to win. So I encourage the Trump administration to continue those conversations and get Ukraine everything it needs to win. And to your original point, you said that we saw the market has seen slumping exports. That's the point. That is the pressure that sanctions offer on this aggressor, on this war criminal. After all, we're talking 20,000 children stolen from Ukraine, taken to Russia, recultured, retaught in Russia. Why would we ever take our foot off the gas? Bad metaphor to use in this conversation. But why would we take the pressure off of Russia? Ukraine needs everything it needs. It needs the support of us and Europe, which it has, to make sure it has everything it needs to win and to stop the loss of life. Russia is losing extraordinary numbers of soldiers. It's somewhere in the area of 1 million soldiers. I guess that means nothing to Mr. Putin, but it means something. The loss of life means something to the civilized world. And this dancing with Orban today, I'm very discouraged by. I wish the president would focus on actually diplomatically, economically ending this war and getting Ukraine the reparations it needs to rebuild.
Congresswoman, we're at day 38 of a government shutdown. House of Representatives has been out of session, I believe, for 49 days. I don't know if you've developed any new hobbies other than constituent services in that time, but we have real questions about what comes next after Chuck Schumer went to the floor today to offer a vote yes on the continuing resolution if it came with a one-year extension of Obamacare subsidies. That was immediately rejected. When you see this today, does that make you think, as flights are delayed by the hundreds now, even the thousands over the past week, that we are nowhere near reopening?
Well, this is the second longest shutdown in our history. I was sworn in the first longest shutdown, the former longest shutdown, 35 days under the Trump's first administration. Here we are, 38 days, but I actually used the number you used. We're actually in a 49-day shutdown because effectively on September the 19th, Speaker Johnson closed session, sent his members home, sent all of us home, canceled session week after week after week after week after week, 7 weeks in a row now. I pleaded with him, reopen session, at least have your members here so we could be negotiating. He's done none of that. And of course, he's also failed to swear in Adelita Grijalva. She's more than a month an elected member. So my hobbies are spending any time I can with my grandchildren. I'm thinking of taking up knitting, but Democrats have been in Washington, D.C. We're doing shadow hearings. Yesterday, we did a shadow hearing on the health care crisis that has been completely manufactured by the Republicans in the House, the Senate, and the White House. I heard from a constituent of mine whose health care for her and her 19-year-old son, she was widowed years ago, her husband died suddenly. She finally got on the exchange and had affordable health care. She got notice that her health care will quadruple. The premium will quadruple. She said, effectively, as I buy that, I'll just be buying catastrophic care because hopefully I will not get sick enough to meet the high deductible. And this is absolutely hurting ordinary people. I met with air traffic controllers today from Reading and from Philadelphia. Do you know the hurt they're in as they just got their paycheck? It comes across with a big zero on it as they are required to work. And they're so proud of the work they do, keeping us safe, keeping the skies safe for us. This is entirely manufactured. It is disgusting to me. And it could be solved by this president in an hour if he wanted to. He's the great deal maker. And of course, if the Republicans would just come back to work.
I only have 30 seconds left with you, Congresswoman, but very quickly, would you support Democrats getting on board with a promise to extend the ACA premium subsidies after the government reopens? Would that be enough to get your vote on board?
No, absolutely not. They haven't promised.
So you need a deal.
Before.
You need a deal ahead of time.
Yeah, you actually have to put it down on paper. We actually have to legislate it. We have to make sure that people can afford their health care. They have tried for 12 years to undo people's health care, and this is their backdoor way of doing it. We're not going to let them do that. It hurts way too many people.
All right. Thank you for the clarity there. Democratic Congresswoman Madeleine Dean of Pennsylvania, thanks so much for coming back on Bloomberg. Coming up, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy says up to 20% of U.S. flights could be cut if the government shutdown drags on. We'll zero in on the impact for airport employees. That's up next. Stick with us. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. This is Bounce Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. Alongside Joe Matthew, I'm Tyler Kendall. And Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy says flight cuts in the U.S. could jump to 20% by next week because of the government shutdown. We'll discuss with the chief representative of the nation's flight attendants up ahead. But first, on the early edition of Balance Power, we spoke with former New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu and now president and CEO of Airlines for America, which represents the major air carriers. Here's part of our conversation.
The pressure on the aviation system and the national airspace as we hit Thanksgiving is going to be absolutely immense. And I don't like using the word disaster, but I think the secretary's right. If it doesn't end probably in the next week or the next 10 days, there is a chance they have to ramp up beyond 10%.
What would Thanksgiving look like? Disaster is the word J.D. Vance used.
Complete gridlock, complete gridlock, because the demand on the system is well beyond, it'll hit about 3 million passengers a day. That forced cancellation and unintended delays will hit really just historic proportions at that point. So this is already completely unprecedented.
Totally.
They didn't want to do it. There's a lot. I know there were some folks saying, well, where's the data? There's plenty of data. Just look at the number of call-outs we have. Look at the slowdowns we have. We had a situation in Burbank a month ago where they literally had nobody in the tower left. Right? Now, thank God they got creative, and San Diego stepped up and was helping land those planes. We had the same thing in Nashville, and Memphis stepped up and was helping land those planes.
Lord.
So everyone is pitching in, as you said. God bless these workers. Every time you walk through a TSA line, please say thank you to these folks.
Absolutely.
They have not been paid in over 30 days. You know what? The average TSA worker, they're getting $35,000, $40,000 a year, maybe.
I don't think
these
most
are
people
not
know
very
that.
well-paid individuals, but they keep coming to work. They keep doing the forced overtime because they know how important their job is to the national airspace, and they're just at the tip of the spear of the victims on this one.
Well, one of the vulnerabilities of the air traffic system is that it doesn't actually take that many people calling out for us to see disruptions. This has long been an issue. We've spoken about it many times on this program. We like to talk about long-term economic impacts, long-term impacts to the workforce. Is there any concern among the airlines that the shutdown is going to have damaging impacts even once the government reopens? Is it going to be hard to get air traffic controllers back into work?
So a couple things. If you looked at the number of individuals who have already retired in the past month, air traffic controllers, every day. It could be every day. It could be another dozen every single day this thing goes on, because they're saying, look, they don't want to be part of this frustration anymore in the system. Maybe they're taking their retirement, whatever it is. Now, God bless them. There's about 10, 11,000 of them out there. We probably need 13,000 in the system. Then you look at the number of people that are looking to come in, right? Maybe they were scheduled to come in to be part of the training programs for air traffic control. We've seen those numbers decrease quite a bit. The government workers that need to certify all that, those are government workers. Well, they're all furloughed right now, right? So now they can't do their job to get the back end of the pipeline to get people into those towers as fast. So that's really kind of jammed up. So every day that this goes on, you're disincentivizing people from entering the workforce, and it's a great job. They're wonderful jobs. We have great schools. This administration's put money with new technology all over the country for this. So the adverse effects, other than we have delays and a few cancellations, to your point on the long term, could be absolutely huge. And on the economic side, if I may, you're already seeing pullback from people booking flights. Airlines tend to be a lead economic indicator as you go into holidays. That's where people spend dollars first, and as those dollars get pulled back, they then get pulled back in your regular spends, both regionally and nationally. So when I talk about the overall economic impact being somewhere in the $250 million to $500 million a day, that's going to have repercussions for months, all the way through the holiday season, undoubtedly. So. And the system just doesn't come back on like a light switch.
Well, that's what I want to ask you. By the way, you can't get a seat on Amtrak right now, but how long does it take? We all know what residual delays are like, right? Maybe there's a big impact on the air traffic control system for like 3 hours, and it takes the next day for everyone around the country to get back on time. If they come,
maybe they've gone on vacation. Maybe they're taking some time with family. Who knows? So it isn't just a light switch. You'll actually need to see that data and make sure folks come in. And it's anticipated. Usually it takes a day or two. Sure. But there is a little bit of a lag there. And then how close is that lag to that holiday weekend, and how much have people actually pulled back?
Insights from Chris Sununu, the former governor of New Hampshire, now president CEO of Airlines for America today. What a time to be in that job. That was on the early edition of Balance of Power here on Bloomberg TV and radio. For more on the impact of these flight cuts, specifically for workers, we turn to Alex Roberts, National Government Affairs Representative at the Association of Professional Flight Attendants. He's with us live here in our Washington bureau. Alex, it's great to see you. Your job is to talk to government officials, not necessarily to us, so we appreciate your being here. I don't know what you're hearing from folks on Capitol Hill, but we talk a lot about the air traffic controllers and TSA agents who have been going without pay, and we really do feel for them right now, particularly as flights continue to take off and land. Your members are in a slightly different situation. They're working, they're getting paid, but they're surrounded by chaos. What does it mean for your business?
Right. Yeah, well, thank you, Joe and Tyler, for having me on. On behalf of my 28,000 colleagues at the Association of Professional Flight Attendants, we really appreciate this opportunity. As crew members, our first and most important responsibility is to ensure the safety and security of our passengers. We have 3 million daily travelers in the United States alone, so it's quite a job. And this reckless government shutdown is making that job more difficult and certainly more dangerous. Again, we are privileged enough to work for a private company, so we are still getting paid. But we really stand in solidarity with our air traffic controllers and our TSA officers, as well as the FAA employees who are also being furloughed. So again, we stand in solidarity with them, but it's been a challenging time, to say the least, really since the beginning of the year.
What's morale like among your members? I'm wondering what the conversations are like as we're seeing these disruptions, and if you're concerned about any longer-term impacts. We were talking with the former governor about retirements in these other fields. I'm wondering if you're seeing anything mirrored here when we know that there's so much pressure right now on our air traffic and air flight systems.
Right. Well, I'm not happy to report that morale in the aviation industry writ large is low, and unfortunately for good reason. Again, since the beginning of the year, we've seen tragedies, we've seen poor decisions, we've seen problematic policies that have all negatively impacted aviation safety in our eyes. Again, we had the DOGE cuts, which were, a challenge for our industry. We had challenges to collective bargaining rights for our TSA colleagues. And then now we have the longest government shutdown in American history. So it's just compounding factors that have really eroded the morale of our colleagues. And again, I just really want to emphasize that our main priority is the safety and security of the flying public. And again, aviation travel is still the safest form of travel in the United States, but that hasn't been an accident. It was decisive decisions, good policies that went into making that reality, the reality that it is that we enjoy now. So now we're concerned that reality may be eroded.
We're trying to get a sense of what these capacity cuts mean for the carriers themselves, because they're being tasked with putting together a whole new jigsaw puzzle when it comes to routes and placement of crews, and that's where you come in. How complex is this when you take 4% off today, 1% tomorrow, going to be up to 10% apparently by next Wednesday? Are you shuttling crews around the country? Are they finding themselves with no flights one day and they sit in the hotel? How does that work?
Yeah, well, it's the not knowing, right?
Yeah.
It's the inconsistency, and as you indicate, this is a whole complex web of logistics, sort of a domino effect whenever something goes wrong, which we've seen in years past with weather issues and disruptions and the like. So that is a concern for us. We have crew members, like I said, nearly 30,000 across the country. Every one of our crew bases are among the 40 airports that are being affected by these reductions of flights. So that's an ongoing concern that we have. And again, it's the not knowing. So we can't plan accordingly because we're not sure at what point this will be resolved.
Are they finding out what their job is going to be the night before? How quickly are your members getting word on their schedules?
Oh, yeah, no, it's happening. Again, the airlines are trying to be proactive, but how do you be proactive in this scenario? It's almost impossible.
Sure.
So we are having members who are getting their schedules completely changed at the last minute. Which again, how do you plan for the future? How do you have a family? How do you have a social life when that's the case? But again, our main point of solidarity is with AFGE, with NATCA, the TSA agents and the air traffic control folks who are not being paid right now to do their mission critical work. So again, we really have solidarity with them and send them our support.
Just in our remaining moment, you've been on Capitol Hill. Lawmakers are trying to reopen the government, perhaps. Could you give us any sort of indication, insight into what sort of conversations are happening when you are urging lawmakers to reopen the government?
Yeah. Well, again, we start with, as I've said before, the safety and security concerns of members of Congress's constituents. Everyone flies now. We're flying at 98% capacity on average on our aircraft. So we really want to hone in on that messaging. We thought there was some productive talks. That's what we were told in closed-door meetings. But now we're feeling a little less optimistic, given the talks have, from our understanding, stopped. So again, we're holding out hope that these members of Congress, that the administration officials will do their job, which they were elected to do by the people of their districts, of America. to sit down at the table, come up with a bipartisan resolution that does not strip away access to affordable health care for the most vulnerable Americans in the country in the process.
You talked about morale throughout the aviation sector and among flight attendants. I'm sure it's not getting better among passengers, right? This has all led to cascading delays across the country. That means potentially more trouble for your flight attendants who have to deal with all of us happy, mostly crabby people. Are incidents of conflict increasing on flights because of this?
Yes. It's still not where we saw it during COVID, thank God, and hopefully it won't reach that point. But again, it speaks to the fact that this has been, like you said, a cascading effect for not just months, but years now after COVID. So that is a concern. Of course, we want our members to go to work and do their job to their utmost ability and stay safe in the process. So again, we want everyone on board, passengers and crew members alike, to be safe and secure.
All right. Fascinating conversation today. Alex Roberts, National Government Affairs Representative at the Association of Professional Flight Attendants. Thanks so much for coming in to see us. And coming up, U.S. consumer sentiment fell to a near record low, according to a preliminary reading this month, as the government shutdown drags on without any end in sight. This as President Trump zeroes in on affordability claims ahead of the holidays. We'll discuss with our political panel next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and Radio. Thanks for joining us. Alongside Tyler Kendall, I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. We'll turn back to the impact of the ongoing government shutdown in just a moment. First, the stories we're watching in today's Power Brief. FHFA Director Bill Pulte says Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are looking at ways to take stakes in technology firms during an interview at a housing conference earlier today. Pulte said Fannie and Freddie are looking at taking equity positions in companies that are willing to give them because of how much power Fannie and Freddie have over the whole ecosystem. Pulte's been seeking to revamp the two government-backed housing finance entities since taking over at FHFA and reiterated he thinks Fannie and Freddie will stay, importantly, in conservatorship, with the government seeking to sell up to 5% of the entities.
Plus, Cornell University is striking a deal with the White House to restore about $250 million in federal funding. The Ivy League school is agreeing to invest $30 million over 3 years in agricultural research and pay an additional $30 million to the federal government related to ending pending claims of wrongdoing. Cornell President Michael Kotlikoff said in a statement the agreement, quote, explicitly recognizes Cornell's right to independently establish our policies and procedures, choose whom to hire and admit, and determine what we teach without intrusive government monitoring or approvals.
Consumer sentiment fell to a more than 3-year low as the government shutdown weighed on the economic outlook and high prices soured views about personal finances. According to the University of Michigan today, the preliminary November sentiment index dropped to 50.3, the lowest since June of 22. President Trump today suggesting again that prices were dramatically lower under his administration. Take a listen.
Our general costs are very low, and I just saw that Walmart came out with a statement last night. They've done it for many years, that Thanksgiving this year will cost 25% less than Thanksgiving last year under Sleepy Joe Biden. So that's a big difference. That's a big difference. 25% less Thanksgiving.
A reporter then asked the president about items Walmart dropped from its annual bundle, including fresh onions, celery, sweet potatoes, chicken broth, marshmallows, and pecan pie. President Trump called the question fake news. Joining us now with reaction, Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis, partner at Stone Court Capital, Republican strategist, and Democratic analyst Jeannie Shanzano, also a Bloomberg Politics contributor. Jeannie and Rick, it's great to have both of you with us here on Balance of Power. Happy Friday to the two of you. Rick, this brings me back to the Biden administration. I have to be honest, and we talked about it a lot on the air. Me, you, Rick, Jeannie, Tyler. The fact that the data say one thing and the president says another, or maybe a better way of putting it, the people feel one way and the president says they shouldn't. Does this feel like a repeat performance?
Yeah, this is deja vu all over again, Joe. At the height of the spiking of inflation, we spent a lot of time talking about Bidenomics. One, horrible name. Two, a disengagement from the administration that somehow they didn't understand what people were very visibly telling them at the time. Those consumer sentiment numbers were almost identical to those today. Today, the president, as you showed in your clip, is out there talking about how low prices are. And talk about fake news, including representing that gasoline prices have fallen below $3, which they haven't. So the bottom line is we have two successive presidents who have completely ignored the plight of consumers as represented in these Michigan consumer sentiment numbers. And we saw the results of the 2024 election, which was a rebuke to that administration's attitude. And we just saw a significant, downturn in Republican support in the 2025 elections. And yet this administration continues to ignore the realities of the situation, which is consumers are telling the Michigan Consumer Sentiment Index that they are not happy with the economy.
Well, Jeannie, we know that Rick, of course, loves the Michigan Consumer Sentiment Index. I'll put a finer point on today's numbers. It declined to its near lowest on record. Let's get your take here on perhaps the disconnect between data and messaging. How can the parties do this successfully as we head into now? It officially feels like we've already kicked off to the 2026 midterm campaign season.
Yeah, already not even a couple days, Tyler. We're just running right into it. I just saw disconnect everywhere. I think it's a great word to use. We had Kevin Hassett on Fox, I believe it was today, saying that the economy is showing signs of recession. We had Elise Stefanik in my state of New York, the representative, a leader in the Republican Party, saying she's going to run for governor of New York and promising to address the problem of affordability. You had the Rick's favorite, the Michigan survey out, and we had Tuesday's election. All of these numbers, all huge pieces of evidence. And yet the president sat in the White House today and said affordability is a con job by the Democrats. And I think it's even worse than that. I think the president and the White House are going to cede this issue to the Democrats. We had James Blair, the deputy chief of staff, come out the other day and say they were going to put off their focus on affordability until 2026. That can't be welcome news for representatives and senators who are running in next year's election. They said instead they're going to focus on safety. Well, that makes sense. And foreign policy, which even Steve Bannon has been out there and said, guys, get with the program. You've got to focus on what you ran on, which is the economy.
Well, they might be running on reopening the government at some point, Jeannie, if this doesn't end. We're on day 38 here. We thought we were on the precipice of something when we came into town this morning. There was talk of progress. Just last evening, Sarah Chamberlain told us on Bloomberg that we were on the verge of the gears turning. Maybe this would be done in a week's time, thanks largely to what's happening at the airport and SNAP benefits not being fulfilled. Enter Chuck Schumer, a new proposal today as he delivered on the Senate floor. Let's listen.
Democrats would like to see an end to this shutdown, and we want to respect Leader Thune's desire not to negotiate on ACA until after the government reopens. Therefore, we'd like to offer a simple proposal that would reopen the government and extend the ACA premium tax credits simultaneously, and then have the opportunity to start negotiating longer-term solutions to health care costs. Let's do all three.
Or not. Dead on arrival, John Thune said it was woefully lacking. And Rick, as someone who spent a lot of years working in the Senate, I'm wondering what you think. President Trump says they all ought to stay in town for the weekend, and I think they're up there right now trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah, look, I think this proposal by Chuck Schumer might have caught the Republicans a little bit off their kilter. They didn't seem to react very well to it. And yet they've been saying, look, we're prepared to negotiate on ACA. Just got to open up the government first. And it almost like they're talking past each other. My guess is that if Majority Leader Thune has his way, he'll work through the weekend. But he's already got members out there on the record saying, I'm out of here. We're not getting anything done and I'm going home. And it's very hard to stop a senator from getting on an airplane. I mean, like, that's almost impossible. And so I think the Republicans, Tuesday was a huge shock to them, and they're still trying to calibrate what to do about these messaging problems they're having, as Jeannie said, on affordability. Two, they've got a president who's insisting that they torpedo the filibuster rule, which they don't want to do. So they're not getting any productive influence by the president of the United States on solving this problem. And now Chuck Schumer, who's frankly taken the high ground after the elections and saying, I got a solution. Leave things as they were 6 months ago, and let's just reopen government. Not a bad argument for the minority leader of the United States Senate.
Jeannie, in our final minute here, to build off of this, I have a strategy question. Why not reopen the government until November 21st? Approve this stopgap measure, surge funding when it comes to SNAP benefits, and help alleviate air traffic control issues, and then make November 21st the new deadline to negotiate by, or else the government would re-shut down.
Yeah, and Tyler, I think I heard you ask Representative Dean a similar question, right? And she was very flat out in saying, no, we won't open it. And I think what the Democrats are saying is there's not a lot of faith or trust in the opposite side, that they feel like they have been focusing on getting rid of the Obamacare subsidies for a long time. If they dare to reopen without an agreement in black and white, that they couldn't trust what's going to happen. And that's not even to mention the issue of rescissions. So I think, Tyler, it's an issue of trust. This shouldn't be as hard as it is. And all I can think is, while people who are hungry, 42 million Americans, and people who can't fly, who have real need to fly, are feeling the pain, our representatives and senators who have been paid through all of this are not feeling that pain. And until they do, they're not going to move forward. And of course, you've got the president on Truth Social just minutes ago saying, stay in town, make a deal, or get rid of the filibuster. And none of that is a starter for the representative or the senators on the Republican side.
Well, what do we have? 3 weeks until Thanksgiving, Rick, in our remaining 30 seconds here. Is that kind of the fake deadline right now? They can't keep this air traffic control system to continue crumbling until Thanksgiving, can they?
Yeah, Secretary Duffy is talking about increasing to 20% the amount of flights that get canceled. And I just want to remind everyone, Thanksgiving is the highest travel weekend of the year.
That's right.
Millions of people could be stranded and all of a sudden away from their families, an important holiday. So, yeah, I don't think it's a fake deadline. I think it's a real deadline.
All right. Our thanks to Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano. Rick's partner at Stoneport Capital, and Jeannie is the Democracy Visiting Fellow at Harvard's Kennedy School at Ash Center. Keep with us. David Weston and Wall Street Week is up next. This is Bloomberg.